the title of my message this morning is Prep is Key, because it's about the preparation that most people never see that goes on behind the scenes. When we started Access, I had no idea what we were getting into to realize how much goes in to making this possible. Amen. Here on Sunday morning. There's so much preparation that most people never see. Right. There's a ton of that goes on. Benjamin Franklin says, by failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. And Chad sent me this week, and I like this, and I'm going to use it. Give a shout out, Chad. Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. That's Abraham Lincoln that said that. There's so much preparation involved in each and every one of our lives. For God could really use us for what He's called you to do. There's a lot of preparation that goes on. Let's read Luke. Start out in Luke. 1st chapter, 11th verse. And there appeared unto him an angel of the Lord standing on the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zacharias saw him, he was troubled, and fear fell upon him. But the angel said unto him, Fear not, Zacharias, for thy prayer is heard, and thy wife Elizabeth shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name John. This will be who we refer to as John the Baptist today. And thou shalt have joy and gladness, and many shall rejoice at his birth. For he shall be great in the sight of the Lord, and shall drink neither wine nor strong drink, and he shall be filled with the Holy Ghost, even from his mother's womb. And many of the children of Israel shall he turn to the Lord their God, and he shall go before him in the spirit and power of Elias, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just. This is pretty much like a resume for John the Baptist, telling him what he's going to do, all the things that he's going to, be so good at, and the thing that all the positive. But it doesn't mention that his head was going to be delivered on a platter. They didn't tell him that he was going to be put in prison. There's a lot of things that John the Baptist had to go through before God really used him and could use him. Just like us, He will have to put us through some things. Let's read the last part of that. To make ready a people prepared for the Lord. See, I feel like that's what our job is here, is to prepare you for the Lord. And we're not doing our job today if we don't bring out the best in you and bring out your full potential. God is preparing you for something. Something. And I've heard preachers that have personally told me that they can, on their way to church, God gives them a message. Well, that doesn't happen for me. There's a lot of preparation that goes behind the scenes for me to get up here. I can't just, I've had somebody tell me they can just read a verse and they can do a whole sermon on that. I'm not that way. God makes us different. I'm not that way. There is a lot that goes on behind the scenes to get up here and do this. There's a lot of preparation involved. See, God has work for each and every one of us to do, and He wants to use us. But before He can use us, He's got to make us usable. So He's got to test your faith a little bit. Sometimes your faith will be tested. But most of the time, these are preparations that are done in a more quiet manner. See, Moses didn't get called into service until he was 80 years old. Did y'all know that? Before he was called into service, God called him. He spent 40 years shepherding sheep in the desert. And during those 40 years, he probably could have wondered, what is going on in my life? Like, I feel like I'm made for so much more. All I'm doing is tending to sheep here. And at 80 years old, God called him, and he never realized, I'm sure in that 40 years that he was out there tending sheep, that he would be tending stubborn, complaining sheep for 40 years in the desert. God was preparing Moses for what He called him to do. God is a God of preparation. God is a God of preparation. And I ask, Jesus didn't start his ministry until he was 30. So what did he do the first 30 years? We don't really know. See, so many more people could have been saved. So many more people could have been healed. But this was God in flesh that had to come here. And it kind of shows us, and we can relate, if Jesus spent 30 years here preparing for 3 years of ministry, what do we have to go through to be prepared for what God's called us to do?
Oh, that's good.
See, God is a God of preparation. And sometimes we feel like the struggle is so real and things are so hard. And we don't understand why we have to go through certain things. Why we have to go through this and why we have to go through that. The hurt and the pain that we have to go through. But it's God's way of preparing you for his calling on your life and the service he's called you to do. See, God sent John the Baptist to lead the way, to introduce the coming of Jesus. That's what John the Baptist was put here to do. Anybody ever been in a courtroom? Every time I get called, I must have a sticker on my forehead. Put him on there, because I get called every time. I have to miss work. But you ever heard the judge comes in and the plaintiff says, all rise? Before the judge comes in? See, he's preparing the way for the judge. John the Baptist prepared the way for Jesus. He was preparing the hearts of people. See, Tom and them today, that's the funny thing is, he's back there talking about David and Goliath. But see, David didn't just go slay the giant.
Amen.
See, he had to kill a bear. He had to kill a lion before he went to slay the giant. See, God had some preparation for him before he had...
Amen.
We know him as killing the giant. But I think it's pretty impressive to kill a bear and a lion. I'm running. Can't climb a tree. I can climb better than you can. But that's pretty impressive. This morning I want to talk about Joseph. And I know we talk about Joseph a lot, and so it'll be good that you can kind of relate since you've all heard it. But I think that Joseph displays character in his life that God wants us to be. He wants us to be a lot like Joseph. And Joseph is one of very few people in Scripture that I can't really find any negative words about. And it's kind of crazy considering the family that he came from. Chad preached about it, Jacob and Esau. And considering who his father was, see, Jacob was his father. And he was the son of Jacob's old age, the son of Rachel. That was Jacob's favorite wife. Chad hit on all this. Since she was his favorite, Joseph was automatically his favorite son because he had it with Rachel. And everyone knew it. Jacob had a lot of issues, though. You remember I preached a sermon a while back, apple don't fall far from a tree, right? Well, I think Joseph broke that cycle in his family. And I talked about how we can break that cycle. Jacob was his mother's favorite. Go back to his dad. And Chad talked about how he got Esau out of his birthright and his blessing. He connived his way into doing that. And that's why he's known as the deceiver. But Jacob then went to spend some time with his deceitful uncle, Laban. Seems to run in that family quite a bit. And after that, they parted ways. Well, here's where I want to get on chapter. If you read in chapter 34 of Genesis, you can read where Leah, which was Jacob's first wife, that had a daughter named Dinah. And she went to go see some young women nearby in a place called Shechem. Well, while she was there, a prince saw her and got infatuated with her. He ended up raping her. So when she gets back and the news is told, Jacob had heard the news of what had happened to. This was his daughter, Dinah, that had been raped. And they heard what he was done, but he wasn't angry. He wasn't angry at his daughter that she had been raped. He wasn't angry at that, but his sons were. And his sons, you can read about it. I won't go into all of it. I'll kind of paraphrase it. But his sons deceived the ones who did it, ended up killing all of them. His sons ended up killing all of them. Well, during the deception, they killed all of them. They came back to Jacob, and Jacob was not mad that that the man had done what he did to Dinah, and he wasn't mad that his sons just killed a bunch of stuff. And he was upset because his sons would bring trouble down on him. He made it about himself. There were a lot of things that took place. His daughter got raped. His sons murdered the whole village there that had raped his daughter. They killed him. But he was only mad because it might bring his name down. Jacob was somebody that was all about himself. He was a passive, scheming, deceiving, self-centered father. And here comes where I want to talk about is Joseph today. So we know how his mother was. We know how his father was. Now let's see about Joseph. Okay, God used Joseph in a mighty way, but there was some preparation that took place. There were some things that took place that God was preparing him for. And I'm going to use an analogy today to try to, y'all know I did the concrete sermon, right? So this one I'm going to make like baking a cake, okay? We all know that Joseph was his favorite son. We also know that Jacob made his son a coat of many colors. Everybody know that? Okay. Well, Joseph had a dream that his brothers, like I said, I'm going to just make it simple here, that his brothers and his dad would bow down to him. And they did not like that. Now, this is the youngest brother telling their older brothers that. I've got 4 older brothers. I couldn't imagine going to tell them, hey, y'all going to bow down to me. Let me tell you what's up. I couldn't imagine that. So that's when the situation they were in. So they didn't like it. They didn't like it at all. And they ended up throwing him into a pit. Now I think this was the first effort, the first thing that God was working on him, because I have no power up here, so I'm not actually going to be able to bake a cake. So, what's one of the ingredients in a cake? Eggs. What do you have to do this egg? You have to break it, right? All right. So God, first ingredient in a cake is an egg. This was the first step that Joseph was being broken for God's service. This was his own brothers. Anybody got any family that you love or hate? This was his own brothers that threw him in this pit. So this was God's first way of breaking Joseph. And the reason I say sometimes that we might have to be broken a little bit for God to use this is because Jesus, when he was here, he broke the bread before he ate it. So sometimes we might have to be broken before we can receive the blessing. There's some breaking that might have to take place. D.L. Moody wrote this, and I love this. When God wants to use a person greatly, he takes him and he crushes him. Because when you get away from yourself and it's all about him, that's when he can use you. A lot of times we have hidden agendas. We can't really be used for what God's called us to do because we have a lot of hidden agendas. We have a lot of things that we think we should do and how things should go, but that's not what he's got for you to do. That's not what he's called you to do. So sometimes he has to break you before he can use you. Just like an egg and a cake is one of the first ingredients. Sometimes we might have to be broken. So he's in a pit, and his brothers see somebody coming through town, and they get this bright idea. I can sell him and make some money off of him. I don't like him. I'm going to throw him in a pit. But guess what? I'm going to get him out now, and I'm going to sell him. I'm going to make some money off of him. So they sold him into slavery. When he was sold into slavery, he was actually sold twice. I'll get to that second one in a minute. Second ingredient in a cake is salt. You know you put a little bit of salt in there? What does salt do to a wound? Burns, right? Salt burns a wound. So not only did his brothers not like him enough and they threw him in this pit, then he gets out of it. He's like, oh yeah, y'all are getting me out. Cool. You're still going to bow down to me, but you get me out of this pit. And shortly did you find out you're sold into slavery. They were using you for a profit. Ever been used for a profit? I've been there. So they used him and they sold him. So what I'm getting at is he already had a wound. The first wound was being thrown in the pit by your brothers. It was just salt on that wound when he was sold into prison, sold into slavery. So the second ingredient is salt. They sold him. That was just a burn on an open wound for Joseph. But God was doing nothing but getting Joseph prepared. Joseph was getting prepared. Well, he was sold into slavery again to Potiphar's house. Now, I don't know. I get maybe Joseph was a good-looking guy. I have no idea. But Potiphar's wife had the hots for him. What's another ingredient in a cake? Sugar. Douse some little sugar in there, right? Sugar makes everything good. So, Potiphar's wife falsely accused him and told him that he was putting a little sugar on her. So, not only did he get sold into slavery, but then Potiphar's wife falsely accused him of putting too much sugar on her. So he was falsely accused for something he didn't do at all. Anybody ever falsely accused you of something that you didn't do? Doesn't feel good, does it? He was falsely accused and there was very little he could do. He was thrown into prison during that time. And during that time, he spent a lot of time in there. I could imagine what God really prepared him for while he was in prison. So what all he went through. We all know that Apostle Paul, different ones, spent a lot of time in prison. And God really built them there. God really was building them so he could use them while they were in prison. So we can only imagine what Joseph, it doesn't really say all that God was preparing him for. But Joseph had a talent of interpreting dreams. And in that prison cell, God was using him to interpret a dream for Pharaoh. Y'all follow me? So not only did he get sold, he got thrown in a pit, he got sold into slavery twice. Potiphar's wife made an accusation that he couldn't defend, got thrown into prison. Now he's ready to interpret a dream for Pharaoh that only he could interpret. Can I tell you this morning that God has a purpose and a plan for your life that only you,
that's right,
only you can fulfill.
Amen.
Others tried to interpret the dream, but they couldn't because it wasn't their dream to interpret. It was Joseph's dream to interpret. So Pharaoh elevated Joseph. What's another ingredient in a cake? Flour. What does flour do? Helps you rise, right? Y'all get me here? Flour helps the cake rise. Joseph was about to be elevated. He was about to be brought from a prison cell to second in command to Pharaoh, ruler over his army. Now that's a drastic difference.
Amen.
So sometimes you might feel like you're in the lowest pit, or you're bound with stuff, but God can be the one that breaks you free to elevate you. God probably is using you in that situation to elevate you. So the fourth ingredient is the flour. He was made ruler over Egypt, second in command. God was getting him ready for everything that was about to take place. See, his brothers, the very one that threw him and sold him, he was about to be the one that saves them. He was about to be the one that saves them. So there was a big famine in the land. And Jacob and all of his sons, Joseph's brothers, found out that, hey, we can go over here to Pharaoh's house. They've got corn. And we can try to get some corn. So they actually make themselves known to Joseph multiple times to come and get corn. His brothers did. Well, Joseph didn't want them to know that was him. So he hid himself. He hid himself. And finally one day, they came in to get some corn. And Joseph made himself known to his brothers. See, that dream that God gave Joseph when at an early age, I believe he's 17, if I'm not mistaken, when God gave him that dream, God was taking all these things into play before he was ready to use him. His brothers show up, and he lost it. What's the last ingredient in a cake? Now, there's a lot of things you can throw in this cake, but butter. You can call me Paula B, butter or butter. Just keep throwing it in there. Butter makes everything better, right? Paula B. Butter. See, God was softening Joseph's heart little by little so he could use him in a mighty way. See, butter melted down, softens, and Joseph had to have his heart melted. And he lost it with his brothers and ended up sobbing, crying to his brothers when they found out it was him. And I'm going to go to 45th chapter and 7th verse right here. That's where we're going to pick up. God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. Can you imagine the maturity that Joseph must have had? Now, these are your brothers, and I know you love them, but man, they did some bad stuff to you. So they're coming to you, and they're scared at this point once they find out it's Joseph. They're scared. And Joseph's saying, it's not you that sent me here, but it's God. See, God is a God of preparation. And God had to prepare Joseph. So now it was not you that sent me, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. See, the things in your life that thought they were there to kill you were actually there to make you stronger. The ones that hurt you so bad were just all they were doing was developing your character. All the hurt, all the pain, and all the struggles you go through in your life was just doing nothing but preparing you for God, what he has for you. I love this. Dwight Eisenhower wrote, there are no victories at discount prices. There ain't no victories at Dollar General. There's something that you have to pay for to have a victory. There's a lot of preparation that goes on to have a victory. And it costs something usually. I'm going to skip down and change it a little bit here. Let's go to Leviticus 9:23 through 24. I read this and I want to share it with you because I thought this was relevant to what I'm talking about this morning. And Moses and Aaron went into the tabernacle of the congregation and came out and blessed the people. And the glory of the Lord appeared unto all the people. And there came a fire out from before the Lord and consumed upon the altar the burnt offering and the fat, which when all the people saw, they shouted and fell on their faces. That's what we want to encounter, isn't it? That's what we want to encounter. We want God to just rain down, send his spirit, and just flow all over, don't we? That's what we want here. But see, that's the end. That's not the beginning of the story. There was some preparation that took place to get to that. See, we want all the blessings and everything God has for us. I'm just keeping it real. That's all I know how to do. We want all these things, but we're not willing to go through what it takes to get there. People look at certain people out there and they see what all they have, but they're not willing to go through what they went through to get that. See, there's some preparation that takes place. And that's our goal here at Access. That's what we want. But we have to back up a little bit. If you read it in Leviticus, you can read it all in Leviticus 8 and the 9th chapter. It's 2 chapters of preparation before this happened. And if you read over and over and over again, and I believe it says, I counted 10 times, it says, Moses did just as the Lord commanded him. There was some preparation that took place. I believe there was 12 steps, if I'm not mistaken, that were taken for all the preparation. See, they made offerings. They did sacrifices. They washed themselves. They anointed with oil. They changed their clothes. And all that Moses said, as he commanded me. As God commanded Moses. And I ask you today, what is God telling you to do? Because if you're not doing that, then we can't experience what happens in 23rd verse. Because there's a preparation stage in our lives. There's a preparation stage. See, preparation leads to presence. So we can also say the lack of preparation leads to lack of presence. Can't we? So I go and say, so what is a microwave? Pretty instance, right? Let me read what it says that I found here. An electronic appliance that heats food using electromagnetic radiation. In the microwave spectrum, a microwave uses the process known as dielectric heating, which causes polarized molecules in the food to rotate and build up thermal energy, which in turn results in food heating efficiently and quickly. And it was first done, sold in 1947. It's called a radar range. Started in 1967. They made countertop microwaves. The Amana Group, I guess that's how you pronounce it, made it in 1967. So what is an oven? An oven is a thermally insulated chamber that is used for baking, heating, or drying purposes. It's one of the most used when you're talking in cooking and baking. The difference is in the principle applied for conducting heat. In an oven, heat is radiated via an electrical coil being heated. In a microwave, there are microwaves emitted in the air pockets that cause the heat. Why is this important? So, in a cake, do you throw a cake into a microwave? Where do you throw the cake? Cooks differently, doesn't it? You throw your cake in the oven, not the microwave. Joseph had to be thrown into some heat. The Hebrew boys had to be thrown into some heat. See, if you look back at, there's so many instances you can read, but if you look back at Esther, when she was presenting herself to king, she was for such a time as this. See, God had some preparation. There was a lot of preparation that went on with Esther before she was ready to do that. Sometimes we have to go through some things in life because God's ready to prepare us. We see so many today that are on fire. They come to church, they get on fire. And slowly, little by little, they cool off. And they're no longer excited and on fire. For God, for church, whatever. See, we call those microwave Christians. Because see, a microwave cooks you from, which is kind of crazy, but it cooks it from the inside out. An oven cooks you from the outside in. Which I still think is crazy. But microwave Christians, they get on fire, but they cool off super quick. they cool off super quick because they haven't went through the necessary heat to stabilize them. See right here, I'm going to show you an example. This is a turkey pot pie. All right, we've all read the back of these, right? And we know it says microwave on high for 4 to 5 minutes. I can heat this puppy up in 4 to 5 minutes. That's what it says. But if I turn that oven on, how long does it tell me to heat it at 400 degrees, 32 to 36 minutes? See, we're in a society today that want to go through the microwave because we want to be heated fast. We want to get heated fast. We're not willing to go through the oven to properly bake and cook like God needs us to get us ready. See, a cake will bake properly in an oven and fully rise and come to its full potential in an oven, not a microwave. Are y'all getting me here? Come on now. Come on. See, we want what God has for us, but we're not willing to go through what we need to go through to get us ready. See, we have to go through the oven versus the microwave a lot of times, and we don't like doing that. And I ask you, see, everybody came here today because everybody wanted to hear a good sermon, right? And everybody expected me to have all this preparation done, and I'm just going to keep it real, and I hope I don't offend you. But you expected me to have all the preparation to come here this morning, right? But let me ask you, what kind of preparation did you do before you showed up this morning? And I mean that, I'm saying that respectfully. Because last time I checked, it wasn't necessarily the quality of the seed, it was the quality of the soil. It was the quality of the soil that develops the seed. So I ask you to check yourself. What did you do to receive what God has for you? What kind of preparation was taking place this week for you? See, God cannot work greatly through us until He works deeply in us. He's got to cook us deep. You ever, Serena does this all the time. We go to eat Mexican, she gets a burrito. So, and I go put that burrito in the microwave the next day to heat it. I can't ever cook the middle good enough, which is why I said it's crazy, because the microwave says it cooks it from the inside out. But I can't, it's like I never can heat the middle of that burrito. I take a bite of it, it's cold. It's cold on the inside, and I got to throw it back in the microwave. That's how a lot of us are today. See, we're burning on the outside, but we're cold on the inside. We're cold on the inside. That oven, if we leave that cake in there long enough, you can put a fork in it. It's cooked. It's done. Joseph had to be left in the oven because God had to use him. God had to use John the Baptist. God had to use the Apostle Paul. God had to use David. He had to go kill a lion and a bear before he was ready to kill that Goliath. He had some preparation. See, God's trying to tell you today, I'm not preparing the blessing for you. I'm preparing you for the blessing. See, God wants to bless you, and He's been trying to prepare you. But are you ready to receive what God has? Are you prepared like you should be? See, He wants to take all the brokenness of your past and make you whole just like an egg, the brokenness. He takes the wounds like the salt that still burn today, and He wants to completely heal you from that. All those sweet memories that went bad, like the sugar, He can turn those into testimonies. He can take the elevated times in our life and the times that we feel like we've fallen flat on our face, and He can bring you to a new level with Him. And finally, like the butter, He can take the churning of your life and bring peace into your life. See, in my job, what I do, the most important thing of my job is prep. That's why the whole thing that brought me to this message is because everything, when I polish a floor, I start it down at a certain metal, and I bring it up, and I get up to the 200 and 400 grit. If I didn't prep right down at the 30s, 50s, and 100s, it'll show when I get up to 200. And guess what I have to do if it shows when I get to 200? I got to start all over. And we've had to do it multiple times. We have to start all over and go back from square one to make it right. Preparation in my job is the number one important thing that we do, is prep. Spend the most time preparing. God will spend the most time in your life preparing you for what he has for you. I don't know. This morning I can't speak for you. I have no idea what that is. I can't speak in regards to what God is preparing you. But I ask this morning is you search yourself and see all these things that you've gone through in life that you don't understand why, and the things this happened and that happened in my life, and why this one did this to me and this one did that to me. God was preparing you for something. Are we willing to go through the necessary preparation for God to properly use us today? Are we willing to get in that oven and say, no, I know microwave is more of an instant gratification, but that oven, I'm going to be ready to go. I'm going to be ready to go. I ask you today, search your heart. I can't make that decision for you. But I want you to come to the realization that some things in life are worth preparing for. And it's our job here at Access Church to prepare you for the Lord, because we're all going to meet him one day. Can I get an amen on that? If you would, please stand.